Hey everybody, in this one I'm going to help you create a procedural ocean with your own little customized shader and customized animation. And what we'll do is just add a few nodes, and then you can have built-in vanilla Blender ocean waves. And then we'll get even more fancy and we'll just add a quick little fake caustic shader to it, a refraction node too from the shading area. All right, let's jump right in. All right, so let's drop in a plane and scale it up just a little bit. And I will Control A, apply the scale. Now what I want to do is go immediately into Edit, hit W, subdivide, type in 100 for the subdivisions. Go back to object mode and let's add a wave modifier. Now you can actually hit play and you've got this funky dunky thing going on here. It's a little fast, so you go to time, and for speed I always like putting in something like 0.02. Maybe a little too slow overall, but this is going to be good for our ocean. And it doesn't look too good even though we've subdivided it. Well, subdivided the mesh, not subdivision surface, which is different. So I'll hit Q and shade it smooth, and Q is my quick favorite, so you'd have to hit spacebar search, type in shade and pick smooth, and then right click and add it. So now the speed is down, we can change some settings like the width and make some pretty neat ripples. We're only going to be working with one axis here. You can pretty much do whatever you want. I'm going to bring the height to something like 0.27. And the narrowness, I'm going to bring it down about as low as I can get it and still see a result. Now, for the next step, what we could do is add a texture. I'll click New, go to Texture Properties, and you got to pick something that's actually going to show up. So my first one, I'll pick a Musgrave texture, and then you can kind of play around with the size of it in here before you go back over if you wish. Just be careful because the presets are pretty good. So I'll go back over to the modifier tab, and now I can play around with the height, and I've got some kind of wave starting up, not much. Now from here you can kind of play around with the settings and do what you want. I'm going to minimize this one and drop in another wave. And now we've got that funky thing going on, so go back to time. Bring the speed down to something a little different this time, something like 0.04 perhaps. And hit enter. And now we've got this neat little fall off going here, but I don't really want that. So I'm going to keep my waves going one way for now, but I think I'm going to like doing the waves going both ways, because an ocean really does go both ways, and this one's going kind of funky because we don't have a texture. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a texture, and immediately you can see we've got something going on here. So back to texture properties, and I think clouds might do good. And then I'll go back over here, and now I'm on the second one. And if you wanted to mute the first one by turning it off in the viewport, that way you can kind of see what's going on. Actually, that's more. I actually meant to select Y for one and X for the other. So the waves look like they're kind of rolling, maybe perhaps over each other, at least by the time we get done. Now there's a whole bunch of settings you could do, but I just kind of bring these down to some of their minimum. That way I could just get this one effect going across. Maybe even bring the width down so I kind of match these. And just remember, no matter what you choose, you're going to need to take, and if you want the waves to be more consecutive, you know, one after the other, kind of mess around with the height and mess around with the width for each one. So I go between here and the other modifier and mess around with the height and width, and then you can get a more steady setup. Now if you want, you can kind of select one wave modifier and go into texture and then kind of play around and pull up maybe something else. The marble kind of looks a little bit more like waves to me, so I thought that was pretty neat. And I can add a subdivision surface to this for now. Depending on how fast your PC is, you can do 1 or 2. Just so nothing crashes, I'm actually going to just leave mine at 1. Go ahead, hit play and see how that looks now. Yeah, it's a little bit better. So now we can add a solidify to this, and I'll minimize my waves because I'm happy with what I have. And so I will add solidify. Let's hit 1 and let's bring up a little bit of thickness. And it's pretty good, and make sure to apply it so it doesn't look terrible because it's not real geometry until you apply it. Now let's jump immediately over into the shading tab, which I kind of have already set up here. And I will go into cycles for this because I'm going to create a somewhat of a cycles material. Go ahead and you could actually click new, or I can X that out. I can come over here. It's pretty easy here if you just do it this way. Click new and then take the surface and switch that to an add shader. Then switch one of these to a mix shader. And now I can take my refraction and dump that in there. I'll take a glass BSDF, and then for the last shader I will use a transparent BSDF. It just kind of built it all for you pretty easy. Let's see if it got it right though. Nope, doesn't look like it got it right. So I don't want my transparent to be over here, and I don't want my refraction here. I want to actually switch these. And I'll put the glass here, transparent here, and I will add the refraction as its own shader. I can do is kind of change this color a little bit to like a lighter blue. That's pretty nice. And then off of the glass, I'm going to drop a color ramp, which is going to kill that color. Actually, I could have waited, but I'll bring this back up to a nice little glossy blue. Kind of bring this over a touch. I'm going to switch it from linear to ease and kind of play around with these settings. And I'll just bring a slightly darker color here and maybe bring it down a touch. And this will produce our fake caustics to a point. And let's see, how much am I rendering right now? Just 10. Let me put this to something like 25. So every time I change it, it looks a little bit better. And let's put a plane under this. So I'm going to switch back for just a moment. Shift A, plane. And I'll take the top view so I can see how big it is. Then I'll take like a side view, G and Z, and kind of bring it down. Maybe scale it up a little bit more. What am I working with here? Under cycles. Okay, so I don't have any lighting yet, and I'm not going to bother with it for now, but I will add a shader to the plane and just make it something kind of darkish gray, so maybe it pops a little bit of the caustics for us. Now we can do, since we've got this kind of set up, is we could even drop a monkey head in here. And I will drop a Suzanne, kind of rotate on the X and kind of bury it so we can get like a little view, if you will, of what's going on. And I'm going to go to Object Properties right here, Shading, and I'm going to turn on Shadow Caustics. So this will, let's see, we want it to cast. We want this to cast, and I'll make the plane receive. And then right above the Suzanne, I'm going to put in a spotlight, light properties, shadow caustics enabled for that. And I believe we have 10 bounces now, if I'm not mistaken. It's 10 bounces. So I'll turn this up to something like 300. Turn on scene lights. Let's see if we turn on scene world. How does that show up now? It's actually not looking too bad. And we have a little bit of a caustic reaction in there. Let's turn this up to like 1500 because the light, like, it's not very close. And you can see the caustics kind of working its way through there, almost in the shape of the Suzanne's. I'll actually put it right about there. That looks pretty nice. So now we've got a little caustic-ish outline of our Suzanne. So let's get back to this. Now what we can do is add in a few more things. And I will drag out the factor, type in MUSG for the Musgrave factor, drop it, pull out a mapping node, nice little vector mapping node here, and make sure you can see everything I'm doing. I don't need my timeline right now. And then from the top vector, I'll type in COOR and get a texture coordinate. And see, do I want this to object? I think I want it to object. Now, if we come back over to our refraction and our glass, let's turn this to 1.333 and hit enter. And let's bring the IOR here down to 1. And we're going to get a lot more penetration of the light. You can kind of change that as you see fit. Maybe even add in a little tiny hint to make this water look a little bit more deep blue sea. And the roughness can be changed, but I wouldn't recommend it. So real quick, with the refraction on, I'll right click and hit M to mute this with the refraction off. And I've got a little bit of reflection here and some really nice caustics actually underneath. And I've got some here as well. But even so, with it, it's pretty nice. Could bring the IOR, change that just a little bit. Maybe 1.3 looks good there too. And so you kind of mess around with these different factors here. I'm going to put the Musgrave to 10. Now what I can do is I can come over to the location and pull that out and type in noise. And I will now put the noise factor in here. And I can bring that up maybe something like 7 or 8. And I will switch this to 4D. And now this can actually be animated. So if I put hashtag, let me get it right, hashtag frame /500 or so. Now you won't be able to see it here, but if you render it out this way, some of the noise will be moving inside and give you a little bit of actual fake caustic movement. It's not easy to see, and then you can of course change this to 1000 if you want to slow it down even more. Alright, so I don't like how this looks. Let me see here. I think I actually want to plug this in to the transparent. Ooh, yeah, that looks a lot better. And I could duplicate that and kind of play around with it. You know how it works in Blender. You could say maybe grab this entire node group and Shift D and maybe plug that into the color and then, you know, change these around a little bit and modify it as you see fit. Maybe change the scale a little bit. Now I want to try generated. See how we look. Yeah, there's actually some there's some depth there now with the Suzanne. That's kind of what I was after. Alright, so I'm actually going to sub the Suzanne. Put a slight subdivision surface on there. Give it 2. Apply it. A little bit better looking in my opinion overall. Alright, back over to the object mode. Just one little final effect. And I'm going to press 3. Grab the Suzanne, kind of bring it just above the water, and I'm going to make it look kind of crazy. So let's see. How do I want to do this? I'm going to rotate Suzanne so she's going across. Something like that. And I will go from global to local so I can actually run. I can actually keyframe this in. Let's pull this up. And I will go back to 1. Insert a location, because I'm not really going to do anything else. And I'll bring this over to something like, why not the whole 250? And then G and bring it over and insert another location. So if I hit play, Suzanne is gradually going across. Now what we got to do is add in another effect just to have a little bit of fun here. And I'll go ahead and add in a warp modifier. And this one is a pretty amazing and pretty straightforward modifier. So you just hit 3 on the number pad and bring the mouse like somewhere underneath here. I'll go ahead and add in Shift A and empty planes axis. Now, I don't know if I scaled Suzanne or not, but I'm just going to apply scale. I don't think I did. And what we want to do is do a to and from with the warp modifier. What the warp modifier is going to do is work with fall off, work with a texture, and if I had added it to this, it's going to deform this according to the position of the to and the from. Or in this case, the from, which will be the empty right here, and then the Suzanne, which will be the 2. So go ahead and take the top view, and I want to make sure to kind of move these into the same relative area. So if I was to take both of these and kind of move them around, I get a neat little effect with the waves. Now what I want to do is just go down to texture, click new, and you can click over here. I always go to the, I'm just habit. I go to texture properties, but this little button takes you to texture properties. Now you can add in whatever image you want. I think I'll just keep it something like a Musgrave. And now as we're moving this around, and let's see if we can kind of change this thing the way we want. Now you get some kind of view here. Anyways, I'll go back to the modifier, and then you can grab the strength, and I will bring Suzanne back down. Maybe? Okay, here we go. And so you can bring the strength up. Wait a minute. Do I have another one of these here? Yeah, I've got a warp on the Suzanne by accident. Okay, so I'm modifying the wrong one. Let me make sure I've even added anything yet. Alright, so I've got clouds, and I wanted to Musgrave. There we go. I said they're messing around with it. Now I know why it wasn't working. Can't be too careful with these things. Alright, so you can kind of play around with the strength and how you want it. You could have Suzanne literally blowing a hole in it, which I kind of like that a little bit better than the Suzanne actually creating a wave. So let's see. I think right about there looks pretty neat. Right there. And now I'll grab the Suzanne and the empty. And let's see here. I'm going to actually parent the empty to the Suzanne. We'll see how that works and hit play. It is working, but it's not working on the correct side. So if I just go ahead and grab the empty, G and Z, I can bring it up just a little bit. Should still be in the right place. And get the strength as a negative, so I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. And now I'll hit play. Yeah, it's a neat little effect. You could change it to make it look more like a wave, but that's still pretty cool. And if you were to do your full render out in cycles, and potentially, you know, it's going to cast some pretty neat caustics. Alright guys, one last thing. I want to take this spotlight, and you can kind of bring the spot size up any which way you want. I'll bring up the light size. Let's try 1000. Not very bright, so I'm going to try something like 3000. Still not what I want. Oops, I ended up with 300. Let's try 3000 again. Actually, that's pretty nice. So now I've got this really nice caustic pattern under here. And what I will do is I'm going to hit number 7 on the pad here, and I'll add the light as a object parented to the monkey. And now if I hit play, the light and the Suzanne should be going. And I think I'm going to change this a little bit on the actual warp modifier. I was hoping actually to get something kind of splashy that goes out. And so maybe in the actual textures here, there's something that will do that. All right, so I switched the coordinates of the warp to global, and I kind of get this effect, which is kind of pushing through, and then the strength can be brought up a little bit. Now, a couple more things I'm going to do real quick is I actually want to go back to frame 1. And what I'll do is I'm actually going to have the camera kind of here. So Control Alt 0. I'll go End Panel, go to View, lock camera to View. Let's get a little bit more room, shall we? Okay, what I'll do is I'll just turn the camera around, have it facing the Suzanne, and I'm actually going to take the camera and parent it to our Suzanne. So as we hit play, we get this effect right here, but it's not really in the right spot. So what I will do is just grab the camera, and I should already have a location here. All right, now even though the camera is following the Suzanne and it's parented, I can still insert individual keyframes. So I've got one location, rotation, scale right here for frame 1. I just make it very simple. I'll drag it out to like 100, and I will, with the selection of camera lock to view, I'll kind of bring it up. All right, so now I've got it to this keyframe. I'll bring it up to, actually what I'll do is I'll just switch the view and kind of zoom in a little bit. All right, at frame 100, I can bring it out to like 130, and I'll turn and maybe Control Z or Control middle mouse and kind of zoom in right there and insert another location, rotation, scale. And I think I can be done. I think I'll just do 200 frames. I'll cut it off there and do a render. And I can bring the scene world out. Anyhow, we could change the lighting 1,000 different ways. I'm actually going to just render out a little quick animation. And I hope this tutorial was helpful, and I will see you in the next tutorial lesson.